couple of things I want to just mention, probably three counter-stereotypical things about the foundation. To those of you who know even just a tidbit about the foundation, here are three things that I would need to emphasize. One is that we actually are not just grant makers in Marin. We range in our grant making to every state in the Union, and so far every continent of the planet save Greenland. I just haven't had occasion yet to send a check and a letter to Greenland, but other than that, year-round, every week, I send letters and checks to organizations in every continent, every state, so we're not just Marin. Second thing, we're not just the Buck Trust. I will comment in just a couple minutes about our honor to be the stewards of Dr. and Mrs. Buck's legacy to Marin County. But it happens that of the 400 plus family funds that we administer, Dr. and Mrs. Buck's fund is the only one that actually has a geographic restriction. That is to say, the money from the Buck Trust, directly from Dr. and Mrs. Buck's wishes, is that those dollars that are granted are just in Marin. The other 399 funds are the funds that are both used to support a number of organizations here in Marin, but also that's where our responsibility is to support organizations not only around the Bay Area, across the country, but quite literally around the world. And the third thing that's a little counter-stereotypical is that while we have decision-making with regard to the grants that are made from the Buck Trust, again, the difference is that with regard to all the other families that have established their independent funds at the foundation, we are in a partnership of decision-making with them. And they really are the ones that have passionate, directive interest in charitable causes, both here in Marin, across the country, and around the world. So, not just Marin, not just Buck, and not solely decision makers for all the grants that go out. So, a couple of basic facts. Susan mentioned, in the aggregate, $1.5 billion. Sounds like a lot, but in the real world, you all know that's not that big of a number. The other thing is not that big of a number, although we're proud and privileged to be in a position to do it. We do make about $60 to $65 million worth of grants every year. Again, in some contexts, that's a large number, and in many other ways, and certainly when you get down to looking at the needs, both here in this community and elsewhere, that number gets divided pretty darn quickly and is not a really stunning number, but it is something that we feel very strongly, very passionately, along with the donor families of the foundation, that it's our commitment to doing our part to support organizations, schools throughout our community and communities beyond. So we do have a keen responsibility. I'll shift now to focus on Marin. We make from the Buck Trust, Dr. and Mrs. Buck's ongoing legacy, we make from that particular fund grants of about $30 to $35 million a year, here, as I mentioned earlier, exclusively here in Marin. About the same total, somewhere in the 30-35 range, it varies a little bit year to year. We make, in the aggregate, we make grants from these other, I'll just call it 399 families, to organizations here in Marin and beyond. About half of the donor families' funds go here to schools, clinics, libraries, social service organizations here in Marin, and the other half is the source that goes out nationwide, worldwide. So let me focus just for a moment then on the Buck Trust, because fairly enough, people in Marin, perhaps many of you, would know the foundation primarily, if not exclusively, if you know of us at all, you know us in terms of our responsibility to be the decision maker with regard to the grants that are made from the Buck Trust. Our four primary areas, Susan referred to the fact that we've just concluded a revision and a refreshment of our strategic plan. We have decided at our Board of Trustees level to focus on four fundamental areas of community and family and individual life: education, health, economic opportunity, and the environment. Within that, we will have some particulars about the grant making that we will do, and I'm happy to cover in our Q&A any questions about that. But let me just, in very brief form, comment about the deliberations that we had to focus even more deeply and intently on these four areas. I've got a 9-member board, about a 45-member staff. We talked to about 120 community leaders throughout Marin agencies, public officials, school leaders, others, to ask a very basic question, which was, how could we do better? How could we dig deeper and have an even greater influence with a relatively modest amount of money that we have for Buck Trust grant making? They helped us zero in on these four areas of education, health, economic opportunity, and environment, and helped us think through and focus on some of the particular ways in which we're going to do grant making in the years to come. But when I say, I'll comment just very briefly on these four, but starting with education, and it also gives me a way of giving you an example of why, though I am proud of the amount of money that we can support primarily schools and organizations working in the public schools of Marin, we typically in a year would give somewhere around $7 million into this topic of education, public education, K through 12 Marin schools. Somewhere around $7 million. But the humbling fact, of course, is that the aggregate of budgets for the school districts that we're working with is probably right around the 700 million mark. So the reason that we can and need to be humble about the fact that we, of any grants that we give to San Rafael, to Novato, to West Marin, to Sausalito, Marin City, others, the reason that it's not any feigned humility whatsoever is that relative to the responsibility, relative to the work, relative to the size of expectations as well as size of staff and effort, the public schools of Marin are carrying out an enormously responsible charge from the community at large, and certainly from parents of the students in those schools. And we're proud and happy to be in a position to help support some of the efforts within those schools, but recognizing that it is, by definition, just a component part. Helping language learning, helping teaching through the arts, helping to be sure that the teachers, when they can get some specialized training in technology or in content-specific courses, have the opportunity to do that. Sometimes, even though our dollars are not huge, the fact that they are flexible and don't come with the usual strings from Sacramento, they can have some extra impact, a little larger than you might otherwise think. for those particular brands. In health, one of the things that we're going to be looking at very, very intently are all the really incredibly marvelous agencies in Marin that serve seniors. There's some really top-flight programs and services within Marin County. We can all, as a community, be proud of the organizations that serve the seniors in our community. And one reason why we have such a strong commitment to doing what we can to help these organizations is that we believe strongly, and I believe strongly, that there's a commitment to the people who helped to build this community into one of the spectacular communities in all of the United States. We have a responsibility ethically, we have a responsibility historically to speak to the needs and the challenges and the issues of seniors in Marin. Saying that, one of the things that we're focusing on and what we learned from the board members, community board member, volunteers, executive directors and staff of senior serving organizations in Marin is that they know fully well they need to develop some business models that are even more attuned to the current structure of how you get paid for what services, under what conditions, under what reporting. And so we're going to be helping support them to learn and develop some business models that will be appropriate 21st century. We can spend a lot of time talking about whether it's fair or right that some of the challenges to these organizations are the way they are. But that won't be as productive as working with them to develop their services, maybe make changes in the structure of the services, in the reporting and billing of those services so that they stay viable into the future. Economic opportunity is a broad category. But I'll mention one thing that we heard loud and clear from this community when we were engaged in these interviews and discussions, and that was around childcare. And I think any one of us that's a parent can think back, either currently or think back to the time. There was hardly any issue more central to family life, to economic life, to the conduct and stability of a family than the challenge of finding accessible, affordable, meaningful childcare. If you don't have that as a parent, a lot of other things start coming undone. A lot of wheels come off the wagon, as they say. And so we're going to focus even more intently on the issue of helping those individuals and those organizations that support the development of meaningful childcare. In other words, this isn't babysitting, isn't propping up a dozen chairs in a U formation around a television. We're talking about meaningful, educationally relevant childcare that is accessible and affordable to people, so it has all the benefits. It has so many multiple benefits concurrent that you all would know it. And then on the issue of environment, I mean, it's one of the great privileges of being in all of us, to live in Marin. We have a reputation that is well-earned, well-deserved, as being attuned to the issues of the environment, attuned to the responsibilities that we have as stewards of the environment, attuned to the issue that we need to reach out to young people and pass on the passion and the legacy that Marin has built over decades of time, but it won't take care of itself. It needs to be that we reach out to young people and encourage and facilitate not only their education about the issues of environment, but about a personal, individual responsibility, as well as a responsibility to all of us as a social structure to be attentive to the issues of our environment, particularly in the challenges of our current time. So those 4 areas are things that we're going to be working even more deeply in. Now, I will say, just in closing on that, we'll get to Q&A. The decision to focus even more intently on these 4 areas and some of the particular dozen or so points within each of these areas that we're going to be making now. That decision necessarily means that we're not able and not going to be able to do a lot of other things. And one thing that is very, very common for me when I'm out in the community and people are commenting about the foundation, why don't you do X, Y, Z? And I'm at pains to say that in almost all of those instances, I'm presented with examples that I agree, and my board and staff would agree, are important areas, are areas that we could be engaged in. But, you know, it is a matter of prioritization and choice. Other people sitting in our seats, certainly other people sitting in my seat, could make a different choice, make a different selection, absolutely. But you can't, we all know this in our individual lives, and it's just as true with the regard of this aggregate of 400 plus families. We can't, first of all, the obvious thing is we can't do everything. And the second is, if you want to really zero in on some areas and dig in and really have some kind of impact, make a difference to a child's life, to a teacher's life, to a community's life. If you want to dig in and do what you can with the resources that you have, it means necessarily making really, really difficult choices. And so I want to just say, in general, and perhaps you'll have examples for me as well, I welcome. But I will say, I know in advance, there are things that we could be doing, there are things that are dearly important to many, many people, and if we had greater resources, we might very well be involved in. But sooner or later, you have to sit down and make decisions, and that's what we've done. We feel privileged to do this. We're the front of the office for Dr. and Mrs. Buck's legacy, all of the grant making we do in Marin. We're the back office for the 399 plus families that establish their individual funds with us. We facilitate and help them in their individual decision making, their individual prioritization, and facilitate their support of schools, of environmental causes, of hospital clinics, of efforts throughout this community and well beyond to really make a difference and answer one very fundamental question that is at the root of what we do, which is, with the resources that we have available, what is a way that we can actually make a positive change in an individual life, in a family life, or in the life of a community? So let me stop there, and thank you very much for your kind attention. Okay, my partner in crime here, Susan, is going to help me with this Q&A. Okay.
We can't be too close together.
We can't be too close.
Okay, so my request is that I will look around to take one question from each table and kind of work through the audience for one question. I know I can predict we won't get to all the questions. I ask that you keep your questions as short as possible and succinct on your comments, and we'll start. Anyone here at this table want to get us to start? Okay. Yeah. And would you stand and just give your name, if there's an organization?
Sure thing. Hi there.
Hi.
I'm Ann Watton, and I'm with the Ceres Community Project of Marin.
Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you as well. So, am I understanding that you are now looking toward funding direct service providers?
Well, yes, that actually has been what we have been doing for many years. That's where our grant making goes in the main, not exclusively, but in the main, to direct service providers, either schools or community-based organizations.
Okay, because that's a shift from your former model, where maybe it was geared more towards poverty, and now it's geared in shifting to other organizations who may benefit through fund funds.
yes, we stay open to continuing support as well as to new support to schools and community-based organizations that are providing direct services to individuals and families. Thank you.
You're president and CEO of Buck since 1998, and about 30 to 35 million a year is spent apparently in Marin for Buck. So I've been listening to the other things about family funds. It sounds to me as if your expertise in that has attracted a whole lot of other people to administer far greater sums of money over a far greater area all around the world. Is that a correct summary of what's happened?
Yes. Very well put.
Okay, working my way to this tape. Anybody question?
Thank you. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Tracy.
Tracy Gary.
Nice
Had
to
the
see
honor
you.
of living in the county for about 40 years and have a great honor. Thank you very much for your work at the health department and keeping us healthy. And, you know, many CEOs would look at a 17-year career and go, oh my heavens, you know, my legacy is up here, it's pretty soon here. So I'm appreciative for what you have done. As a leader who's also sometimes stayed a long time in organizations, I know that the measure of my deciding to move or not was, am I pissing off more people than I'm actually pleasing? Because sometimes, you know, it gets a little hot when we feel like we haven't quite accomplished all the things we wanted to accomplish, let alone the community. So we want to create a caring Marin. I think we all know that. In your history, you've been able to allocate over $700 million at least. You've grown some of the revised funds, but we have huge areas that have not made much progress. We don't have a lot of race and class consciousness in the county or commitment. So I'm just wondering, in your final years, what do you really hope to punch out to create a more caring Marin, including, you know, obviously the defunding of the arts and all the other stuff. I'm sure there are things that you wish you were the only decision maker. I'm just curious as to really what you want your legacy to be. If there's any board member here, please let this man at least design and dream what he would do if he could.
Thank you, Tracy. That's a very thoughtful question. The essence of which I think is, well, what would I do in my final years at the foundation? I have, you know, you're quite right, Tracy, and as you know, it is my honor to serve a board of trustees, and my honor to be in a position where I get a chance to hear and listen and intently learn from many members throughout the community. But to your question, what would if I had that moment, if I were dreaming of a particular focus, I lean strongly to investments in our youngsters, and I mean down to infancy. I don't mean that to the exclusion of the other areas of priority that I've mentioned, and that I think you could probably tell from my remarks I feel passionately about. But I feel it as an investor of philanthropic dollars that are in rare supply, frankly. That the investment in infants, toddlers, young children, it returns on the investment just an incredible impact. I would love to have it be said that the foundation, it's never solo to me, but that the foundation has made a real mark on improving the equity of opportunity. It's a theme for us that I believe passionately in. There are some young people in our community that start with 2 and 3 and 5 strikes against them before they get their fair start, and I would love it on the issues of economic equality, racial and cultural equality, equality of opportunity. It's not about equality of outcome and result. For a lot of young people that you could give every possible benefit to. We know this in all of our lives, but it's a really great investment to go into communities where some of the young people don't have the advantages that many of the rest of us have in our lives, and make an investment there.
So hopefully you can use it out when you get to use it.
I'll work my way around here and then come around there, so anybody gets free.
Thank you. I'm Frida Winnick-Zolan. to inquire as to how much your organization, or your foundation rather, pays out per year for the environment, and what are some of the projects in the past few years that you have done, environmental issues?
Thank you, Frida, appreciate it. I would cite as the question about what would be an example of some of the projects that we have supported in the area of environment. Our largest support over the last few years, Frida, has been to the Conservation Corps of the North Bay, which I think is one of those organizations that is just stellar in that it takes young people, many of whom come from very challenged environments, and helps them to not only learn the issues that are urgent with regard to the environment generally, but specifically to learn the work ethic and the focus and the topics that they can address in team efforts of working both here in Marin and actually through the North Bay. It sort of hits a number of our key priorities all at once about environmental stewardship, about real impact, real work and real impact, helping to work with open space districts or parks or other organizations that are looking to lessen their imprint on a negative imprint on the environment. It helps young people to have self-esteem and educational opportunities. Many of the young people from the Conservation Corps given for the first time the chance to really think through and dream about and have some help in getting into college. So it's an environmental expenditure, but also one that hits on a number of our key themes. That's been our biggest expenditure over the last couple of years.
Okay, I'm over on this side now. We kind of switched things up a little bit. Take a question over here.
Hi, good afternoon. Tammy Edmondson. I'm president of the board of the Throckmorton Theater and communications coordinator for the Community Arts Coalition.
Nice to meet you, Ken.
Good to meet you. So my understanding is a little different from the way you described it, but is that Community Foundation is meant to reflect the needs, interests, and makeup of the community that it serves, and that despite the fact that you obviously would do more if you had more money, with $1.6 billion, Marin Community Foundation does have an extraordinarily broad capacity to do that. So with that in mind, I would like to ask basically two questions. The first is, how is it that the foundation has made the decision in the strategic planning process to eliminate the entire category of arts and culture from its fundable program, with the narrow exception of teaching periods? And second, the fact that it appears that there is no representation either on the board or leadership staff, or to my knowledge within 120 community representatives in the strategic planning from our vast arts and culture sector, which some of us would say contributes immensely to our community and clearly has substantial economic need.
Right. Thank you very much. I appreciate the question about funding in the arts. It's a difficult one, and when I suppose that there's no better single example when I was saying earlier about difficult choices. But one of the things that we decided as a group and ultimately as a board of trustees, we were going to focus, as you mentioned, Tammy, and it's not a brief aside. It is a deep belief that one of the things that we can do for young people and for the arts community and arts efforts of Marin County is to be sure that young people in our community have the chance to develop their own artistic capacity, their own love and appreciation of the arts, their own involvement in the arts. It's a very difficult decision. It's relatively easy to say, well, yes, but it wouldn't make any sense to teach kids and encourage kids in the arts if the arts community of Marin weren't thriving. True enough. And we have to look at that area just as we've had to look at some other areas and say, is it possible for the community itself, other members of the community, patrons of the arts, artists who can encourage others to participate in supporting. We're 100% behind it. We have a long and deep history of funding the arts. Many of the arts organizations in Marin, if you ask them the history of their contributions have received and continue to receive from the foundation millions of dollars in support. Our particular focus, again, a difficult prioritization choice, but a one made with great commitment, and that is that there are young people in our community whose home life and school life would be without artistic involvement and without artistic capacity and engagement, absent some additional support, and we intend to give that additional support when and under the circumstances that we can. We really believe in these young people having that opportunity.
Okay, David, a question?
Yeah, hi, Tom.
Hi, David.
I'm David Guggenheim, a longtime executive director, mostly retired, Marin City educational program. I very much share your priority with young children, intervening as early as possible. But what are you doing to make it possible for the families of young children to have affordable housing? Rents are ever increasing. People are getting really forced out of housing. And I have a second quick question. Is how much of the 30 to 35 million donor designated comes back from the nonprofits? Because there's a general perception that with the Buck Trust, Marin has everything it needs.
Okay. Two questions. One around supporting families through affordable housing effort. The other, a more directed question with regard to the funds of the families, donor families of the foundation. Of the roughly 30 to 35 million, just in the aggregate, about half of what those families ask us to focus on is here in Marin. So that really is a tremendous testament to the fact that there are still needs, and will continue to be needs well beyond that. That the families within our coalition certainly are cognizant of, participate there. Almost all the families, you've heard me mention a couple times now in my description, that we make grants elsewhere in the country and elsewhere in the world. Almost without exception, the families that have us do that from their funds concurrently make grants here in Marin. So as we build the donor-advised funds of the foundation, welcome more and more new families, which we've had a definite increase in over the last few years. As we welcome new families, it means that there's more resource available both here in Marin as well as to efforts outside, and it tends to be concurrent. With the issue of affordable housing, to be clear, we don't develop affordable housing. What we do is in those instances where all the other factors, the community planning process, the presence of a well thought out plan by an affordable housing, a nonprofit affordable housing developer to develop a plan through all of the community planning process. In those instances where we can be of some support, we have been and will continue to be of support in those projects. But we don't generate those projects or design them or in other ways have a say in how they are done. We support those projects that we think are well crafted, well thought out, and we do believe that there's a benefit to not only to the individuals that can move in there, but to the community as a whole to have that kind of diversity and strength.
What about rent supplements to people so they don't get forced out of current housing?
Rent supplement to individuals. We tend not to be engaged in supplemental income to individuals. It's just a distinction in our funding criteria.
Okay, table number 7.
Current swap.
Yes, I see you again.
When Beryl Buck donated the organ to the San Anselmo Church, she asked me to initiate it singing Mozart, this because she loved buying music. She served on the board of the Marin Music Chest. That's an 80-year-old nonprofit that gives awards to gifted students for excellence in classical music. The awards I received sent me to the Juilliard School, and I now serve on the Music Chest board. But when the Music Chest asked you for $500 hall rental to present our award winners to the public, we were told Dr. Peters does not fund merit. However, a second organ was funded and built after Mrs. Buck's death because the foundation knew that would have been her wish. So I'm asking, what has become of the Beryl H. Buck Awards for achievements in changing lives through the arts? You've now abolished funding for the arts. You admit you're taking a variance from the donor's wishes, but you claim that's legal. But how do you answer the Marin community that you were hired to serve?
Well, several points in there. Let me just say that, like a lot of people in public life, I sometimes get quotes attributed to me that are as surprising to me as they are to others. I love merit, and that's what I support. So anybody that has allegedly quoted me to say that I don't. Yeah. Well, I'll be back to my office this afternoon. So, but to the point, and I appreciate very much the focus on the arts and on Mrs. Buck's passionate involvement. We continue is not deviating from Mrs. Buck's wishes. Her wishes were very broad in terms of supporting the community over time. It is true, over a quarter century and more time, there are different ways in which that expression is made. We've made direct contributions to organs and to choirs and to plays, and so we also are making now the choice to focus a good deal of our artistic funding into the education of young people. Down the line, there undoubtedly will be other decisions, other choices, but we are very proud of the fact that we stay consistent. I happen to be in contact with members of Dr. and Mrs. Buck's family. We have one member on our board of trustees. We're very confident that Dr. and Mrs. Buck, if they looked at our procedures and our decision making right now, would be proud of the impact that has been made with their unbelievably generous gift to this community.
Clayton Smith, this is going to be an accounting question.
Okay.
The $1.6 billion, you have a $60 million grant going out in the coming year. That's 3.75%. I'm not sure if that's actually something that you annually agreed to as a percentage point, but it brings and begs to me the question, given the returns that are going on in the stock market. But and can you share with us what your return on investment is? Mm-hmm. And the second question is, notice you have 40 members staff. I'm assuming that the majority of those people are actually paid people.
Yes, they all are.
And they're all paid. And that brings the question to my mind, what is the amount of salary, overhead, and its relationship to the $60 million? Are you 10, 15, 20, 40%? So those three numbers I'd like to know. The return on investment, the amount of overhead, and the final question is would you offer an opinion on, given the collapse in fixed income yields, what your prescription would be going forward as a granting agency, given the fact that you're now pretty much totally dependent on stock market returns for your income? Thank you.
Okay. Well, believe me, if I had an answer to that very last component of the question, I would make even more use of my time in those consultations. But I will say this. One is, anytime you do a calculation about our grant making, there are a couple of things that are important to know. One is that with regard to Dr. and Mrs. Buck's fund, which is an endowment fund. We manage it as an endowment for not just over years, but over decades. And like many, many endowments, it's the golden rule of endowment expenditure is that we use a 5% figure, but it is 5% over a 5-year period. It's a rolling 5-year average. So if you look just at any given moment of asset total, that won't tell you what the 5-year rolling average is. I won't take the time here, but just to reference that the principle is one that allows us to be more stabilizing in terms of the amount of money that we have to give out. We give less than we might otherwise in the really high yield years, more than we might otherwise in the low yield years. It allows us to have a degree of stability that some of our sister foundations and some of the universities with pretty major endowments, I would suggest semi-humbly, that they look at a principle like that as opposed to a principle that you're just spending on 1 year's assets. Your question about the return on investment, it depends, of course, on time range. You're obviously attuned to that. The 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 15 year, 20 year. The range is probably somewhere between 6% and 17 or 18%. It depends on the year. But I also want to emphasize that there's no single figure for our investment because we invest differently in different packages and with different priorities with regard to the hundreds of funds that we manage. So there's not a single figure that tells you that number. But with regard to the Buck Trust, except for the really bottomed out years that we experienced about, 6 or 7 years ago, where there was a real hit on our portfolio as well as others. But in the main, it's probably between 6 and 7 to 17 or so, depends on the year. With regard to your question about fixed income investment, that's part of our portfolio, bonds and other fixed rate elements. We're also invested in stocks across the country, around the world. It's a tricky business. We are very much benefited by the fact that we've got a 7-member investment committee that advises me, my staff, and the board with regard to investments. So we have that great advantage. I'd welcome you to go onto our website and take a look at the members of that organization, and also all the particulars of our investment results are there on the website, marincf.org.
And the overhead, the dollar overhead.
Yeah, that varies, and it is actually a figure that's probably around it's around 10% of an annual figure. But
what is that in dollars?
It's about 6. Mm-hmm.
6 million.
About that.
That's your total overhead.
Yeah, we remembering that we are responsible to invest that sum of money over hundreds of funds to $1.6 million total. So I welcome you to take a look at our website, and a lot of the particulars are there.
Okay, let's go on. We've got so many more questions that people want to ask of Charles. You've been waiting, and then.
I'm Charles Bruce, and
Yes, Charles.
I think we know each other.
Yes, indeed. Nice to see you in person.
For the rest of you, just a disclaimer, I wrote 2 long cover articles for the Pacific Sun on the foundation and mainly a criticism of their lack of supporting the artists. When I came here in 1970, I found out that Marin was a place where there were lots of talented people, but very little money for the arts. And so these people were sort of underground. Then came along the Buck Trust. And Mrs. Grant, Mrs. Buck's will stipulated that it be for the benefit of the people of Marin, and she wisely put it in the hands of the San Francisco Foundation, which had a record of supporting, among other things, artistic and cultural endeavors. So she was well aware that that's where part of her money would go, and indeed it went. And it was a glorious period during the early Anyway, I'm being prodded here. And I would love the chance to spend 15 minutes or so debating it. But the arts saved the Marin Community Foundation from disaster when the San Francisco Foundation alleged that it had saturated the philanthropy in Marin, and the arts were a prime example. And we stood up and said no. We met with Doug Tony, the county council, and we were able to overcome that in court. So now we see that the arts, after a long period of dwindling, all of the things that had been built in the 80s and 90s have now disappeared or are disappearing. Everybody's in great financial trouble. So now we have the announcement that the arts not only are disappearing, they have disappeared from the agenda of the foundation. And I want to know, now I get my questions. I want to know how you justify grants to the environment, and we mean the physical environment, and what about the cultural, intellectual environment of Marin? Isn't that important? And secondly, and this is most important, who are the people you consulted with when you say you consulted with all those other groups about how the money should be spent? Who in the arts community you consult with before you did this, you took this act? As Yogi Berra, the great philosopher, said, it sounds like deja vu all over again.
Thank you, Charles. It's nice to address you in person as opposed to over the phone. I appreciate your thoughtfulness. The Marin Community Foundation has a long history since, as I know you know, of supporting arts organizations in Marin. Many arts organizations, you ask them about their revenue budgets over a number of years, will confirm that contribution. And scores of the families within the Marin Community Foundation today direct and we facilitate, and I send from the Marin Community Foundation grants to arts organizations throughout Marin. So just to be sure that at least those baseline facts are clear, millions of dollars of support. The truth of the matter, as I said at the outset, difficult decisions have to be made. If you'll never get a word of contrary opinion from me about the value of the arts and cultural activities in this community and other communities. I think it is enormously important and enormously essential to the vitality and richness and fabric of a community. I also feel that there are many individuals in this community who can help us all. To your very strong and poignant presentation, Charles, many individuals with the resources to step forward and help on the issue of supporting the various theatrical and musical and other arts organizations that are here in Marin and are worthy of support. We encourage that. We continue to be strong supporters in that way. As I said, we far from being absent from the field of arts or absent from the commitment to the arts. It is that we feel there are many, hundreds and thousands of individual youngsters in our community who deserve to have the opportunity themselves to become engaged and feel just as passionately as you and I do now, Charles, feel just as passionately about the arts because they got a chance as young people to be introduced, to be facilitated, to learn, to have the joy of involvement in the arts, and that ultimately over not just to the end of this year or not to the end of this decade, but over time will be a substantial contribution to the arts community of Marin and beyond, and also, of course, an equalizing opportunity for the young people that are helped by this more focused grant making.
All right, our last question is going to go to Dick, and then you'll have a chance to make your final wrap-up comment, but this will be our last question.
Thanks, Tom. Dick, Marin Independent Journal. In your comments on the four priorities you had, education, economic opportunity, environment, and health. There was no mention of housing as one of the priorities. Is that, I know that in the last 5 years has been a major commitment to the Marin Community Foundation. Has that priority changed? If it hasn't, where does it fit under those four, and how much are you directing annually toward affordable housing, any other aspect of housing and lobbying for housing?
Understood. Dick, thank you. It actually, the simple, direct answer is that to the support that we would continue to give to affordable housing would fit under economic opportunity. Our sense that, as an earlier question and statement, that oftentimes this is one of the key things that a family needs and a family it benefits from, is to have the opportunity to access affordable housing in Marin. So to the extent that we have opportunities to support those projects, it'll be within our economic opportunity theme. To your question about, we don't fund any advocacy groups at this time. We have committed to and continue to commit to the reputable nonprofit housing developers that operate here in this community. Eden Housing, EAH Housing, Bridge Housing, those that not only design, develop, build, but continue to manage and maintain as good neighbors affordable housing projects in Marin. So when we have the opportunity to support them, they're the ones that have to develop with their local community the projects. But when we see a really good project, I'll give an example. Last year we had the grand opening of a project in Novato on Diablo Avenue, 49 units of affordable housing for seniors. And it was a marvelous opportunity to go in. It was developed by Eden Housing, based in the East Bay, but they've done a lot of projects here in Marin, North Bay, San Francisco, and beyond. Well managed, gave 49 seniors the opportunity to continue to live in this community that they helped to build. It's managed in a way that engages community-based organizations and, for activities and facilitation of housing. Those are the kind of projects, Dick, that we will continue to keep our eye out for. Perhaps in Marinwood, perhaps in working with the Whistle Stop organization. But beyond that, this is a community decision. I'm well aware that in this room and in this community, this topic is one hot topic, and I respect that. I respect the fact that the only project that we're going to be supporting in any event is a project that is well designed, well thought through, and it goes through a community planning process, and to the extent that it has that viability, great, we're going to support it. If not, we are not housing developers. We are not even involved in active direct advocacy, other than to say at this point clearly, we believe strongly that having a range of economic backgrounds, having a range of families, having an opportunity for children of families who've contributed and helped to build this community, have the opportunity to be able to live here and not be forced out because they can't afford to rent or buy a home here. We believe strongly that Marin itself will be stronger. Not just the families that might benefit, the individual families that might benefit, or the individual seniors like the project I just mentioned in Nevada. It's not just that they would benefit, but that we as a community, morally, economically, ethically, we would benefit by really well-designed, well-crafted projects in the future. So we'll be there if they're there.
So to this whole audience, I want to thank everyone who asked a question. I acknowledge there's so many of you that raised your hand that I didn't get to. So with sorriness that we don't have another hour or so that we could go on with this conversation. Tom, a big thank you to you for coming.